The situation in West Asia is getting more and more fragile, and the chances of US and Israel resuming their hostilities against Iran are increasing day by day. And this is according to my analysis. And to understand why I am saying this, we must look at the events that are taking place right now. On 10th of May, Iran sent its peace proposal to US. What happened after that makes it even more and more clear that US and Israel are preparing to resume hostilities against Iran. And why I'm saying this is because on 11th of May, Trump said that he doesn't like the proposal by Iran and that proposal is totally unacceptable. A day later, when asked, Trump said, I don't think about America's financial situation. I don't think about anybody. I think about one thing and that is Iran can't have nuclear weapons. So we can clearly see that US and Israel started their attacks against Iran to stop Iran from obtaining nuclear weapons. And now the peace talks are also going to make that happen. But now, why do I think that these peace talks are highly likely to collapse, and why the strikes would resume on Iran by US and Israel? We can understand these by the comments and tweets and speeches by different officials, high ranking officials from US, Israel, and Iran, that the direction in which the talks is going is not the direction of peace, it is the direction of war. Because the two key issues which are there for the successful peace talks to happen are first opening of the Strait of Hormuz, which US and Israel says, especially US says that they want the Strait of Hormuz open, and the second is the highly enriched uranium HEU present inside Iran. Now talking about the first point, which is opening of the Strait of Hormuz, I believe that US doesn't actually care about opening of the Strait of Hormuz because if we think deeply, why is the strait currently closed? On 8th of April, Iran and US announced cessation of all hostilities across all fronts and opening the Strait of Hormuz. So the Strait of Hormuz was actually open on the 8th of April. But what happened after that? Since there was no agreement reached on the HEU present inside Iran, US actually blockaded Iranian ships from exiting the Strait of Hormuz. In response to that, Iran again blocked the Strait of Hormuz. So, if we think the Strait of Hormuz is currently blocked because of the US's blockade for Iranian ships. If US decides to remove that blockade and allow Iranian ships to go out, then in response to that, Iran might also do the same and open the strait. But why is US not doing that? US is not doing that because it wants it as a leverage to force Iran to surrender its nuclear material and bring Iran back on the table because that is the key issue and not the strait. So now we understand that the strait is not the key issue because US can simply just open the strait at any time by withdrawing their naval forces and allowing Iranian ships to pass through the strait, and then Iran can do the same. So opening the strait is not a big task. It is the willingness of US which is prohibiting the strait to be open, and that willingness is because of the nuclear issue. So now if we come to the nuclear issue, which is the presence of HEU inside Iran, there are two probable solutions, and I think there are only two solutions which can be there for peace talks to happen. The first is that the HEU stays inside Iran and Iran promises not to enrich uranium to a certain level for a certain amount of time, which is actually the topic on which talks are going. The other option is that Iran removes its stockpile outside the country and gives it to either US or to a third country. Now, if we discuss both of these options, let us discuss the second option first, that is removing the enriched uranium outside Iran. Iran has consistently refused to fully surrender or export the stockpile to US or a third country. So Iran is basically not going to give up its stockpile of HEU. So that option is out of the table for Iran, and Iran has mentioned that a lot of times that they are not going to simply give up that nuclear material because they think that it is their right to enrich uranium to a certain level for medical purposes or whatever reason they say. But it is not acceptable for them to get rid of the HEU from their country. So Israel and US say they want the nuclear material out, Iran says it won't. So this is the deadlock in this situation which can't be solved. The second option which we have is the HEU stays inside Iran, but US and Israel would place restrictions on Iran for the level of enrichment that they can do with that material and for a certain amount of time, like 10 to 15 or maybe even 20 years, which is the on which the negotiations are currently going. So what happens if Iran keeps the HEU? This is not the option that Trump wants at all. Why? Because Trump criticized the JCPOA deal under Barack Obama, which said that Iran can keep its enriched uranium to a certain level and promise not to enrich to further levels up to some time. That is, it was a temporary deal which prohibited Iran to enrich uranium for a certain amount of time, to a certain amount of level. And in return for that, US lifted sanctions on Iran, some sanctions on Iran. And now, if Trump agrees to keep the HU inside Iran and make restrictions on the enrichment, it essentially becomes JCPOA again, and it is a worse version if you think, because under JCPOA, Iran didn't have 400 kgs of enriched uranium, which Iran has now. Under JCPOA, Iran didn't have 60% enriched uranium, and that too in large amounts, 400 kgs, because JCPOA prohibited Iran to have more than 300 kgs of HEU, but Iran has it now. Even if US limits the enrichment, Iran still possesses the knowledge and the material required to enrich it further, and after 5 to 10 or 15 years, Iran can do the same. And again, for that, Iran is asking the sanctions to be lifted off and the reparations to be paid for the damage that has been done to their country. So if US agrees to this proposal, it is actually a worse deal than JCPOA. So Trump would not agree to that because Trump himself said that JCPOA was one of the worst deals that US made, and it was a complete waste of a deal because US gained no good from that. So now we understand that keeping the HU inside Iran is not a good option for US, and the only option is which is left is removing the HU inside Iran. And we can understand that from the statements of Netanyahu as well. So during the 60-minute interview past week with CBS, Netanyahu said that I think it accomplished a great deal, but it's not over because there's still nuclear material, enriched uranium, that has to be taken out of Iran. There are still enrichment sites that have to be dismantled. Now, on the question of removing highly enriched uranium, Netanyahu said, "You go in and you take it out." So it is clear from the statements of Netanyahu that Israel doesn't want the HU inside of Iran, and neither does US, because as I told, it would be JCPOA verse version. And if we now look at Iran's perspective, Iran will not agree to remove that material outside of their country because they consider it as their right. And they have a very firm stance on that, and they have repeated it a lot of times. So now I think you can understand the deadlock here. Strait of Hormuz is not the priority for US for the talks. The priority is nuclear enriched material, and for that we had two options: either to keep it inside Iran and restrict Iran for further enrichment, or we can just remove that material outside of Iran. But both the options are not suitable for either of the parties, since, as we discussed in the first option, keeping the material inside Iran would just show US's failure and going back to JCPOA deal again, and that too when Iran now has a much high level of enriched uranium. And the second option, which is to remove the HEU from Iran, is what Iran opposes. So now there is no possible solution left for the peace talks to proceed. And that is why it is very likely that US and Israel would forcibly remove the HEU from inside of Iran. And to do that forcibly, you have to get troops on the ground, you have to make the bombs flying over Iran and do all of it again. So that is why I think the hostilities will resume again, and you can get further indication of that from the statement of Israel Katz, who is the defense minister of Israel. Last week, Israel Katz, on the memorial ceremony for soldiers, said that our mission is not over. We must complete the goals of the campaign in a way that ensures Iran will not again become a threat to existence of Israel to US forces for generations to come. That we are prepared for the possibility that we will soon be required to act again to ensure these goals are achieved. Marco Rubio also had similar words that if necessary, we are prepared to go back and do what's needed to bring them back to the table. Now, all of these statements indicate that both US and Israel are ready or are getting prepared to launch the strikes again and get the HU outside of Iran. Because apart from that, there is no other option left. Some other indications are also there which make this thing more obvious. Is that Trump recently completed his China visit, and as soon as the visit was over, Putin announced his China visit from 19 to 20 May. I don't think that this is just a coincidence, because the moment Trump left China, Putin announced his visit. This may indicate that China may know what is going to happen next and wants to discuss with Russia that which what steps are they going to take when this happens, not if. Apart from that, a report also says that US officials are pushing the UAE to take more aggressive frontline role in ongoing conflict with Iran, including actively encouraging Emirati forces to seize a crucial Iranian island. I wonder if that's the path of peace we are going towards. Some other important things to note, which indicate the direction of war again, is first that US is considering to rename the operation as Operation Sledgehammer. Basically, not rename actually, give a new name to the operation, which is Operation Sledgehammer. And what this would enable is it resets the 60-day clock, which makes the government require congressional approval for further strikes on Iran. So that would essentially create a legal bypass which would allow US to resume the hostilities again. Second is that 15 more F-16s were spotted in Prince Sultan Air Base in Saudi Arabia. You don't place an additional amount of fighter jets if you don't want to attack a country. Now, 12 US tankers were also seen in the Ben Gurion airport inside Israel. And now these tankers are either transport aircraft or refueling tankers, which can be used again in the operations against Iran. Apart from that, two carrier strike groups are already present in the Middle East region, which is the Abraham Lincoln and H.W. Bush. Again, as I say, you don't place two carrier strike groups near a country you don't want to bomb. Another point to note is that now there are 5,000 Marines in the CENTCOM area which are ready to operate at any conditions when called upon. There are these 31st MEU and the 11th MEU which are there in the CENTCOM area. And apart from that, the 82nd Airborne Division, which has 2,000 to 3,000 paratroopers, they are also stationed across Middle East, waiting for the orders. Another indicator is that on 8th of April, when the ceasefire happened, Iran had conditioned that war should be stopped against all fronts, which includes Lebanon. Now, what is happening is Lebanon is getting bombed day by day, and the intensity is getting higher day by day. So, as Trump said in past days, that the ceasefire is in life support and in a very critical phase. Now, different airlines have also cancelled or postponed their flights in the Middle East. Like, well, Air India has cancelled its flights from Delhi to Tel Aviv till the end of June. Air France and KLM has also cancelled their flights. Finnair has also cancelled their flights. British Airways has also cancelled its flights. And, and on 12th of May, EASA increased the duration of their warnings till May 27th. Now, these are all the indicators which point towards the same thing, that hostilities are going to resume again, and it is not a matter of if, it is a matter of when. What I predict is that they are going to resume soon, as soon as next weekend.